She introduced me. I'm Sean Lange. I was born and raised on the mission field. My dad is Paul Lange. He's the director of the Bible College here. And in 91, I believe it was, him and my mom went over to Baya, Hungary, starting off to go serve at a church out there. And then I forget what year it was, but then they moved over to the Bible College in Austria when that opened up to kind of help run that thing. And then in 2001, we moved to Hungary, Vojta, where the Bible College was there. And so at this point, my sister was born in 95, I think it was. I was born in 97. And so we were born overseas in Europe there. And I grew up mostly in Vojta, Hungary. And that was really beneficial for me because I got to be surrounded by people serving out the Lord by living their Christianity, going out on the mission field. I got to meet Bible college students who came from different countries, whether that be it broke the families of them choosing, like whether they left Islam, or sometimes that Catholicism in Europe is very strong and they view against Christianity, and so there's that. Just a lot of people that gave up everything to seek the Lord. That was really impactful on me, and just knowing the Lord. And then it was my mom. When she had Jake, I believe Jake was born in 2008. I don't know what the actual complication was, but my mom had spinal fluid leaking from a medical procedure when she was giving birth to Jake. And that initiated, my mom kind of went down a dark path for about a year or 2 years. Just mentally, her brain fluid was leaking, in her spinal stem. And so that caused a lot of medical changes, depression. And so I felt like I lost my mom for about a year. And that was the start of kind of harder things impacting me in ways that I couldn't really deal with properly. I didn't know how to, but I just kind of shrugged it off like it didn't matter. And then, so she came through the other side of that by the grace of God. And then about a year later, my dad had, within the course of 1 week, 3 lung collapses. He's never smoked a day in his life. He's healthy, and just out of the blue. And so he was in the hospital for a couple of months. And the doctors kind of told us he was going to die. And then so there was like the second phase of having to have to process something that was really difficult, that I couldn't really reconcile while the Lord was allowing these things to happen to good people, right? Like, why do bad things happen to good people? But so then my dad recovered and life kind of went on. But those things did shape me in a certain way, and I never talked about them, and I just kind of shut in from it. And then in 2011, we moved to the Bible College in California. My dad moved our family over there, and he served there for a year. I was in middle school at the time, and that was a big culture shock. That rocked my world. Coming from a little village of like 800 people, farm village, and coming to Southern California, and I don't know what's going on. My world just got flipped upside down. So, but it was there that I was introduced to, I guess, just a lot of the things that you see in the world, just personalities that are godless. And I was praying before I was eating lunch, like my first week there. I was sitting in front of these 2 kids, and this kid starts laughing at me. He's like, "Are you praying?" I was telling him, "Well, yeah." "You're not?" And he's like, "No, I can't believe you believe in that crap." And that was the first time I heard such a strong view against it. And I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess, I do. I don't know. You want to talk about it?" And it was really weird. It was foreign. I got to talk with him. But so, yeah, that was just being exposed to that. But then I met some friends And the peer pressure starts, peer pressure is the word, right? Started to kind of kick in. It was like, I don't want to be alone all the time. I want some friends. And so I felt like I had to compromise a little bit in order to be able to relate with people. And so that was kind of the start of things in my own heart, that I wasn't walking with properly in the Lord. Now, I had known the Lord. I had a genuine relationship growing up with the Lord, and I know that. And this is where the struggle, I guess, kind of started to take place between what you can choose to do in life. And I just wasn't honoring the Lord in that. We moved to Indiana in 2012 or 13. I forget, because it was weird. We moved either right before or right after the New Year, so I kind of get the years mixed up. And then I was here for my freshman year of high school, and it was there that my cousin Felix, my mom is Swedish, so I have family in Sweden, and he was in Sweden. He committed suicide, and that was really difficult to deal with. He had some mental struggles, not of a grave capacity, but enough where he had difficulty making decisions and rationalizing information. And I was close with him. And what really challenged me about that was, if I've known the Lord and he's revealed how deep his love is to me, why couldn't he have done that for Felix when I knew he was hurting? That was really what I was challenged with. And I shut in from that. That was a critical moment in my life where I started to doubt the Lord and distrust his judgment, because I couldn't understand. That was the basis. And it wasn't like 5 months later, my little brother started to develop a serious case of asthma. He'd have these asthma attacks where a couple of them he had to go to the hospital. And that again, it was like, what's going on, Lord? Like, my whole family loves you. We serve you. What is this, right? And there was one night, Jake's asthma attack was so bad, we had to call an ambulance, and my mom was kind of struggling to keep it together, so my dad was with her and I was with my little brother. And things got kind of settled there, and so Jake went with them. And it was like I had to, then at that moment, I didn't have to pretend to be strong anymore, because when I was with him, I was trying to just display strength, like it's gonna be okay. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know if it's gonna be okay, but I don't want him to think that. And so finally he went with my parents in their room, and he was laying in their bed, and I heard him say, "Am I gonna die?" And I went in my room and I just collapsed. I mean, like, I've never done that again, but my muscles gave out, like out of fatigue from, I think, just emotional stress. And I was laying on my floor, and I couldn't understand. I spoke to the Lord in a tone I never had spoken to him before. I just was like, all right, this is it. You explain. You need to explain yourself right now. Because it's not even like, I didn't feel like I was even choosing to be done. It was like, I don't even know if I have what it takes to go on. I don't know how to. And he spoke to me in a way that was more real than any conversation I've had with a person in my life. He said, "Sean, am I not still sovereign?" And I had to accept that. He spoke it to me in a way that I was compelled to accept it. And I wept out of just almost soberness, because it was like, I'm compelled to admit the sovereignty of the Lord in this. And in it was like this request of like, would you just trust me? Like, am I not sovereign? It's like, okay, Lord, you are sovereign. And something out of that I want to speak on. I will stand firm on the word of God in my life right now and till the end. In his word, he says, all things work together for good to those who love him. And I think there can be difficulty when it's like, well, why does God cause things to happen? Like the Lord will do things to you in your life, but he also will just let things happen. It's not like God's authoring every single incident. Like he didn't make my cousin commit suicide. And I want to share the good that can come from that, because I went out to a Bible college discipleship youth camp in a sense out in Marietta one summer, the summer after my cousin committed suicide. And there was a worship song playing before one of the services, and it was At the Cross. And I think the chorus goes, at the cross I bow my knee, where you bled and died for me. There's no greater love than this. And I was just overwhelmed with the reality of the love the Lord has for us. But in that moment, I felt overcome with, again, a sorrow and a grief of like, how come my cousin couldn't have known that love in that moment? Like and I had to walk out and just start crying because I was losing it. And the Lord, I can't explain it in great detail because I don't know how, but it was like the Lord just kind of wrapped his arm around me and brought me in. He's like, Sean, I want to show you something. And it was almost as if he could hold it. It was the love that the Lord has for us. And I can't fathom that, but he let me glance and catch a glimpse of how much that love is. And it's so overwhelming. He goes, that's how much I love everyone. But there's others out there that are hurting, that are on the edge of their life, that don't know that. That's why I need you. I need people to communicate that to them, because who else? That's how I see the Lord working all things together for good. I know where my cousin's at, is in the arms of the Father. And he's surrounded by love and comfort that he never knew from his earthly mother and father. But I know that there's people here that don't know that is a truth for all of us, that there is a Father. David writes, when my mother and my father forsake me, then you are there for me. And I think that just speaks on the degree that God is invested in all of us. And so that was a pivotal moment to how I'm supposed to respond to the love of the Lord and show that to others through my life. And I wish this was like the end of the struggles, but it wasn't for me. I took on a lot of guilt in it too. My cousin had messaged me. We would talk a lot on Facebook, the Facebook messaging aspect of it. And he had messaged me. What I come to find out was like the day of or the night before he had committed suicide. And he's just said, hey, how's it going? Can you talk? I never saw that message till after. When I figured that out, it's like I relapsed after so much that the Lord had kind of helped me through. I saw that, and I just relapsed again because I just wasn't on my Facebook that much. And so I started to just take on a lot of that guilt and a lot of that shame as if I had caused it. And just started to close in from the Lord. It's like I just kind of got quiet from talking with the Lord because I just didn't know how to go about that. I moved out to California on my own junior year of high school to go just kind of live with my best friends out there. That's where I had any friends, if any at all, that I knew. And it was there I met a girl, and I fell in love with a girl. And in that relationship, when it was like the first 7 months, it was okay. And then it started to cross some lines. And the Lord very much started to convict my heart about it. And I knew I needed to pump the brakes. And so I talked with her and I told her, like, I don't know that this is honoring the Lord. I think we need to stop and think, catch our bearings a little bit. So we decided to take a week of a break just to apart and talk from each other, apart from talking from each other. And we got about like 4 days in that week. And we didn't follow through with it. But what I did in that moment of that week was I replaced the Lord from being the first love in my life. And I chose somebody else to actively pursue. And I don't know that I had done that to that degree before. And then that didn't end well. And when we broke up, I was heartbroken. And this was the beginning of my wandering from the Lord. I just wanted the hurt to shut off. I just felt like I'd been hurting for so long, and then this just sucked even more. I just wanted a break. So I hit my friends up. I was like, hey man, I know you got some weed. Let's start smoking. I just want to shut my brain off. And I didn't anticipate the direction that would take me down. It took me down years of trying to shut my mind off and close myself off from the Lord. And sin is a slippery slope. It started with the joints, and then it was smoking as much as I could, drinking as much as I could, and it turned to harder drugs. And during this time of my life, I think I heard the Lord speak to me. Just about every day, I've tasted and I've seen the goodness of the Lord. I remember hearing that verse. And he was reminding me that I knew the truth, but I wasn't running to it. I was running away from it. And so I spent years just shutting myself off from the Lord and his love. And the darkness and the lies and the confusion that are in that, I can't even harp on how damaging that is. The enemy, when you put it, I don't know if any of you have done any martial arts or training, but it's so critical to know how to defend yourself in a confrontation. And a lot of that stems from posture and hand positioning, because you're ready to respond to offensive blows. The second you remove the word out of your life and the Lord, you've just removed that defense, that stance of truth that offers. And so that was what I experienced for years. It was just darkness and the weight of my sin, and taking the weight of the world on my shoulders, which was breaking me, because I thought like it was up to me to fix things. It was up to me to know to do the right thing. And because I wasn't able to do the right things, I just thought I was a failure and that I was just doomed to succumb to nothing and just be damaging to everybody else around me. And because I felt so much shame, I shut people out, because it was like, oh, I'm just going to ruin you too. And that's even worse, because God calls us into fellowship. Because when we're not strong enough, we lift each other's arms up. That's the example Christ gave. That's the example we see in the Word. But I separated myself from that. I was foolish enough, I was stupid enough to believe this lie of, I don't need church. I got the Bible. I don't need other people. The whole fellowship part that the Lord calls us into, that he goes into so much detail explaining how important it is on his heart. I don't need that, right? I can do it without that. I couldn't. And so, anyway, that part of my life led me down a dark path. And I got to the point, I was just at rock bottom. I dropped down to like 118, something like that, pounds, just because I was physically ill. I couldn't eat food for about a year. I think I had an oatmeal packet a day. And if I ate that, I would probably throw up. And I was throwing up bile. I was doing hard drugs. I was living in my car for some months. Then I was living with my buddy's girlfriend and him. And just coming unafraid. And the Lord allowed me to be broken in that and physically. Kind of cool how he works. I started to develop anger issues. And one day I'm driving with my buddy, and this guy in a big truck cuts me off. I'm like, oh, you don't cut me off. Meanwhile, I have a broken collarbone from skateboarding, so I'm in a sling, 118 pounds, and this guy cuts me off. And so he's like, pull over. And we pull over, get out. This guy's just towering. He's 240 pounds of just muscle. That was my first thought when he got out of the truck. I was like, man, you look smaller in the truck. That's for sure. But he gets out. We're face to face. We're screaming at each other and just cursing. And we just get back in our vehicles. It didn't really come to anything. We just were angry at each other. We get back in our vehicles. We start to drive off. And it was then he looks, he's on my right side. He looks over at me and he hawks a loogie and he spits and it gets on my buddy. Because all our windows are down. It gets on me. Man, I lost, because I'm just thinking, you can't do that. Like, you can't spit on me and get away with it. Like, bro, I'll go to the grave out of anger for that one. Like, something's got to be done. And I was so angry. I'm looking around. I'm looking for weapons in my car and I'm like, oh, I can't do anything. And I just saw the steering wheel in my hand. I was like, well, I can do one thing. So going like 50 miles an hour, I just smashed this guy on the road as hard as I can, just out of sheer rage. And we go off the road. I've pinned his door in now at this point. And my buddy's like, dude, you got to dip. Like, you just hit him. So I'm popping in reverse and my car is pinned into this truck. And meanwhile, this guy's scrambling out of the window over my windshield because he looked like he had a hive of bees at him. I've never seen somebody this angry in my life. And so he's getting on the other side of the car. And then I look, he breaks my face in. And it was like within moments, though, all of a sudden a Border Patrol agent is just on the sidewalk. No vehicle or anything. And he has his badge around his neck and his gun drawn. He's just like, stop. And so we stopped. And that was it. And after that, a lot of cops came and there was ambulance. There was a lot of cars stopped and there was lies being told. I was saying that he got out, he punched me in the face and I tried to get away and I accidentally hit his car. And he was saying that out of rage, I just hit him, he never got out. And the cops knew we were both lying about it. Because I had a cop ask me, he's like, here, he had his notepad and he's like, so how far would you say you were when you tried to like pull away? I'm like, oh, about right there. It was about he's like, so like 15 feet. I'm like, yeah. He's like, so from a dead stop, 15 feet, you're halfway into his vehicle with yours. That's what you're telling me. And I remember like going, yeah, that's what happened. And they knew I was lying, but they had no definitive proof, if anything. And so finally, there's like 3 cops with him, 3 cops with me. Every time we try to talk about the incident, we keep screaming at each other and cussing at each other. And so they had to separate us. And finally, a cop comes over to me after some time and he goes, okay, so what it looks like is if we pursue criminal investigation, you both will likely have a felony for assault with a deadly weapon. And it was at that point, I remember looking at that guy and he's going like this. He's like, nope. I gave him the thumbs up. I'm like, yeah. No, it was an accident. And at that point, all the cops are like, what are you talking about? We're like, no, just a traffic accident. I just didn't see him. And so they were just done with us at that point. They're like, whatever. You guys want to write it up as a traffic incident? We'll just write it up as that. But quit wasting our time. So they all leave. I shook hands with the guy. And we worked together, got the vehicles unpinned. They were actually able to drive away. But we're driving away, and I remember talking with my buddy. I'm like, dude, something doesn't make sense. Like, why would we both have gotten a felony for assault with a deadly weapon? Like, I understand why I would have, because I hit a guy intentionally with my vehicle. He just punched me in the face. Like, that's assault and battery. That's not assault with a deadly weapon. And meanwhile, my buddy's like, man, yeah, something's not right. Like, I've seen that guy before. I know that cat. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know about that, but, like, something doesn't make sense. So we were like, well, let's go to the sheriff's department. We'll get the write-up ticket of the traffic incident. We'll get his name, and we'll just look it up. Turns out he was a professional MMA fighter. I had no clue. That guy would have snapped me in half like a twig. And would have if the cop wouldn't have stopped us. And then my buddy was like, man, that's where I've seen that guy before. Like, I've watched him on TV. And, but all that to say, in the middle of my brokenness at this point in my life, where I just was unhinged and completely irate and irrational, in the grace of God, he allowed me to hit like the one person in that valley full of 1 million or more people that I could have I wouldn't have ended up with a felony. Because it was only because he was a professional fighter in California that he had to license his hands to the state as a deadly weapon because he had completed training in his martial arts. So by that, I hit the one person, like, this probably isn't the right way to say it, but like I hit the one person I was allowed to hit because even there, the hand of the Lord was protecting me, his grace. And so I look at that incident, and it took me a long time to see that. But eventually I realized that, like, man, David says, I forget what psalm, but he says, where can I go to flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. Behold, if I make my bed in hell, even there, you're there. And so I see the grace of the Lord very much like that, just always watching over us in ways that we can't see. He allows us to see at some points, and maybe there's just others that we don't. And so it was then, I remember calling my dad kind of the week after that, and I just crumbled. I just started weeping on the phone, and I was like, I think I need to come home. It's been some years just sewing into myself, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have the capacity. So my dad flew out to California, and he drove back with me. And I didn't want to face Indiana. I tried to leave this state 3 times, and the Lord brought me back against my will each time. The last time being literally broke. I needed surgery. The punch that I took broke my nose, but I had broken my nose so many times before it collapsed my nasal cavities. So I couldn't breathe through my nose at all, and I was never going to again unless I got surgery. My collarbone was 100% snapped in half and disaligned, so it needed to be realigned. On top of that, I'm mentally just broken. I'm 120 pounds. I can't eat any food. I'm just thrown up. So I was just not working. I was out of order. And so I had to come back to Indiana. But it was here that I remembered having no friends, being the most depressed I'd ever been, losing my cousin. It was even just association by location. Having to be in this building when I came back, I hated it because that's just where I'd remembered having to deal with those things, and I wasn't dealing with them well. And so I started to have a panic attack in the car driving back to Indiana. I think it was in Colorado, because I just felt like it was going to be the end of me. And I forget kind of how the conversation went, but I was talking with my dad, and I had exhausted him. And I think he said, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he said, yeah, I don't know either. And I don't think I'd ever heard that from my dad up until that point. Like, it just seemed like he always had the answer. And then to hear just like, man, we're at a point where he doesn't know also. For a moment, that scared me so much because I thought, well, it's hopeless. And then the Lord spoke to me. He said, Sean, would you just trust me? Would you just trust me? So I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to stay in Indiana then. And I won't leave until you guide me out. But I'll at least be where you're going to bring me. And even then, that process took a little bit. I did it on my own terms for the first part. I came back, and this is where I got introduced to Danny. He had heard that I was coming back into town because he had been a student of under my dad here at the Bible College. And he reached out to me. He's like, well, I don't know if you have a job, but if you need some work, I got some hours. You can put some tools in your hands and get you paid until you find a job. And so I started doing that. And I think it was like 2 weeks into that. I'm working with him in a kitchen. He looks at me and he's like, so what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm going to go cut this trim. He's like, no, what are you doing? Like, are you working for me? Are you looking for a job? What's the deal? I was like, I don't know. I guess I'm just working with you because every day I show up, you have something for me to do. And he's like, well, just come on full time then. I'll apprentice you and teach you, but you want to do that? And I said, yeah, I do want to do that. And it was then, man, the Lord's so cool. He gave me something to do, and he gave me a guy that loved the Lord doing it with me. And I got to see what I was not willing to look at and confront, which was just the Lord, because here I just thought he was some big meanie at this point in my life. And no, I just got to see the character of Danny and the love of the Lord in him. And yeah, so that was about 2 years I was working with Danny. And it was there the Lord was working on me. He just was drawing out a hunger and a thirst to know the Lord again. And my sister had turned me on to the app, The Word for the Day. Chuck Smith has a lot of his, through the Bible, studies through it, his topical sermons, which are his Sunday morning sermons. And I started to listen to that. And the Lord was just drawing that thirst out for him again. And I was driving downtown one day to a job site supply to go get materials. And I was listening to Chuck, and I forget what the overall sermon was, but he was mentioning, he mentioned the scripture in the Word of God where it says, "What fault did your fathers find in me? That they replaced me for broken cisterns that don't hold any water." And the Lord hit me with that, because he spoke, it was like in that moment, he spoke directly to me. He's like, "Sean, what did I ever do to you that you think that you're going to find the fix in something else?" And I realized, oh my gosh, I've removed the Lord from the first love in my heart, and I never put him back. I just left him out there, trying to fill that now even more empty gap with other things. And I started weeping, because I'm just thinking, I'm a fool. The truth of the ages and the love of eternity was in front of me, and I rejected it. And then what does the Lord say about that? He says, "Remember those things which you once did. Return to your first love." That's the cure. It's so simple. It's so tangible. That puts it in my wheelhouse. I can do that. And so that was where the Lord just gripped my heart. And it was like, all right, I just want to draw near to you. I want to be close to you. Whatever that looks like, I don't even know anymore. But I just want to be close to you, Lord. And yeah, so then I did an internship out in Hawaii for 8 months at a small church out there. Funny enough, my prayer had been, I was thinking about the passage, "Be still and know that I'm God." And I remember thinking, Lord, I don't know what the heck that means. Help me be still. Then, sure enough, he brings me out to a ranch for 8 months where I'm just by myself working in the dirt. That's it. I had no transportation. I was in a Waimanalo, which is an agricultural part of Oahu. I had, not a bike. I fixed up a bike, it broke. I fixed up a moped, it broke. And finally, I just was like, all right, I'm just gonna live on the ranch. There was chickens I had to take care of, so they provided eggs that I ate. I had to take care of some horses and work the land. And the Lord allowed me just to be still in that. And then come back here. I did construction for a year, and then I realized, I'm not serving the Lord in this. This is good, but I don't believe I'm doing what I'm called to be doing. And so I quit my job, and the Lord had me be still for a year. And it was there I met Kimberly, and I was just still in a lot of, deceived by a lot of lies that the enemy had just sowed into me. Because be not deceived, God is not mocked. What a man sows, that shall he also reap, right? I had been in darkness so long, I couldn't distinguish who was the darkness and those lies. And I'd have these attacks where I saw myself as a failure still. And I would hear I'm a wretch, I'm a failure, I'm nothing, I will never amount to anything. I will never know love. I'll never be able to give love. And I just believed those were my thoughts. And it was meeting with Kimberly and seeking the Lord and reading my word that Kimberly was telling me, she's like, that is not you, that is an enemy. And I was like, yeah, but it's also me. And it's like, no, it's the enemy. And So I started asking the Lord just to help me out with that. And I remember the moment I was having this kind of panic attack at my kitchen table. And I'm just, like, it was like my head was just being, like I had a tornado around me of thoughts of just, I'm a wretch, I'm a failure. And I'm just like trying to see the Lord's face in the middle of it. And in a split moment, I heard a distinct change in what was being said. It changed from, I'm a wretch, to you're a wretch. You're a failure. Like the grammar of the thoughts that I was hearing changed. And it dawned on me, like, these are not from me. I thought these thoughts were mine for years. And they're being spoken to me by somebody that hates me and wants to kill me. Whoa. I had no idea. But the Lord delivered me from that. And then he brought me here to Horizon, where I've been working in maintenance now for about a year, and a little over a year, about a year and a half right now. And yeah, just wanting to know the Lord and looking to him for something to do has brought me a path of opportunities I could have never imagined. And it's cool how when we just, for me, what I see in that is that when I surrendered to the Lord and I just finally came to the actual purpose of my heart to, you have your way, Lord. I don't know what I can do. I don't feel like I can do anything well, but you put something before me. I'm going to do that thing. And that's very biblical. Jesus said in John, as my Father gives commands, so I do. If I could sum up what my life looks like as a Christian to maybe somebody who's inquiring or doesn't really know what that means, it's like it's not a set of rules that you follow. I don't do rules well. I think I'm intrinsically like a rule breaker. Like the stove's hot, don't touch it. How hot? You know, like that's my first thought. And then after that, I'm like, was it really that hot? You know, but no, finally it was just like, okay, Lord, you just have me where you're at. I'll just do that, because I clearly don't make good decisions on my own accord. And then it makes it very simple, because then it's just about loving him and doing what he set before us and just doing it with him. I think I can naturally be so much of a doer that I'll forget why I'm doing things. I'm just doing it. And in that, I feel like Martha sometimes, where it's like, Martha, like, what are you doing? You know? Not that what Martha was doing was wrong. God is there's worshiping and then there's serving. And both are essential, but not without worship. And that's what Jesus said. He's like, well, Mary has chosen the one thing that's needful. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my testimony, and I don't know that I could draw it to a point other than when you just look for where the Lord is, where you're at, and not somewhere else, then he's there. And he meets us where we're at, like he said with Peter, do you love me? 3 times, right? But he's asking him, do you agape me? Peter's like, oh, Lord, I phileo you. He's like, no, do you agape me? Peter again says, I phileo you. And then Jesus says, do you phileo me then? It says that Peter was sad. I think Peter got it. He's like, oh, I'm obviously not saying the right thing. I mean, he was pointing on also the fact that he denied him 3 times before the rooster crowed. But he was also giving him a chance to redeem himself by being found in the love that the Lord has for him, because the Lord loves us. And he's willing to meet us where we're at. Like he met Peter where he was at right there. He wasn't disqualified because of his shortcomings. Jesus in the shortcomings is able to expend his love there. And so that's what I've experienced in my life, is there's just no shortness of the love of God. There's nothing that disqualifies us, because I would be disqualified if that was the case. I could stand on that, but I know I'm not, because the Lord redeems. The Lord's love is in nature redeeming. If it says, by this we know love, because He sent his son who laid down his life for us. That's a redeeming act of sacrifice. That means love is characterized in redemption by sacrifice. That's the love that the Lord has. And the best prize of heaven wasn't held out by any degree for us. And that, I can live my life on that. I can go forward in that. I can now walk through my failures understanding grace because I'm not good enough. The Lord had to teach me that. Like, Sean, I didn't die for you because you were a sinner and you knew no better. And I needed to show you that grace, but now I expect different because you understand it. Like now the status is a little higher. You need to walk a little bit more perfectly for me to love you and for my grace to be sufficient. It's not that at all. It's very much just like, no, under construction to the day I die, he who has begun a good work in you will be faithful to complete it to the day of Jesus Christ. And I look for that day. But until that day comes, my prayer is like, Lord, just keep me faithful to what you've put before me. And I can't look at that time frame in big scheme. I have to look at it like, what am I going to do right now? What am I going to do today? So that's all I got.